So today, here in Nubra, I've come again, and I'm going to give a discourse on the teaching of the Buddha. As we have already prepared, the teaching is going to be on the two texts called In Praise of the Buddha for Teaching Dependent Arising or Dependent Origination, and the 8 verses of Training the Mind. So I thought I would give a short commentarial transmission of these two texts. Do you have radio? Come here. So in Bodh Gaya, there were many Tibetans who came from Tibet. Sit here. Signal scone. It's working for them. You sit here, it's better. So when tantric initiations are being given, there is within that initiation there is a section where the disciples would take bodhisattva vows, or generating this altruistic spirit of enlightenment, bodhicitta. And so similarly, I thought I would do this ceremony for bodhicitta here, which is, of course, my daily main practice, one of the main practices daily. And the other practice that I daily do is that of meditation on emptiness, shunyata. And so these while giving the teaching, I would also like to go through the ceremony for bodhicitta, this altruistic intention to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings and for fully enlightened beings. So those of us gathered here, amongst us, there are people who are believers and non-believers as well. So amongst those who are believers, there are people who believe in Buddhism and Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and Hinduism, such as followers of the Vedanta or Sankhya school of thoughts. So there may be people from these different religious backgrounds, followers of these different religious traditions. So when I talk to people, I make the point that first of all, we are all human beings. So there are 7 billion people on this earth. So whether you are a believer or non-believer, that's the first thing is that we are human beings. And then our religious traditions come as the second. And as Buddhists, we usually pray for all sentient beings. We say, may all mother sentient beings have happiness and be free from suffering. So this is what we pray on a daily basis. And we don't pray for just Buddhists, but we say for all sentient beings. So we're not talking about only human beings as well, but all sentient beings in the 3 planes of existence. So, though we do pray for all sentient beings, in practical terms, human beings are the ones to whom we can do something, for whom we can do something, because we have this language to communicate with others. Otherwise, the animals, birds and so forth, we cannot do much because of this lack of language. In practical terms, we can do something for the 7 billion people on this earth. So we can actually share love and compassion amongst these sentient beings and talk with them, communicate with them. And so this is the first level on which I usually give talks to people on the basis of being, firstly, human beings. So all of us, all beings, all life on this earth, do not want suffering but want happiness. And amongst these living beings, the 7 billion human beings are the ones who do not want suffering but want happiness. So since we conceived in our mother's womb, and as we developed feeling and sensations more and more, when we began also to have this wish or instinctive wish not to suffer but to have happiness, which are unwanted, and the happiness which we want. So regarding the pain and pleasure, these experiences have to do with consciousness or mind. And so when we explain from the psychology point of view, in the Indian tradition, there are the 5 sensorial consciousnesses and the 6th one, which is the mental consciousness. So there are 6 consciousnesses. So the pain and pleasure, which we respectively do not want and want, have mainly to do with our mind. From our own experience, we can see seeing something beautiful or hearing beautiful music, and also smelling fragrant smell and tasting good taste, and also having a good touch. So these are sensorial experiences, and through these we draw some kind of a pleasure. So the pain and pleasure that are based on our sensorial experiences and the mental ones, if we compare these two. So I have some Christian practitioners who live as hermits, like 5 years as hermits, who did not take any proper food but bread and tea for 5 years. So I have met one person at one point of time, and then when I met him, I said, for the last 5 years, as living as a hermit, what's meditation? have you done? And this person said, I meditated on love. And so when he said that, there was a very special kind of a brightness, some kind of a shining in his eyes, filled with joy and happiness. So although he didn't have any stimuli such as sights and sounds and so forth to give him pleasure as such, entertainments, but because of using his the sixth mental consciousness, he was able to draw that kind of experience of joy and happiness. So if you are unable to maintain a peace of mind, even if you may have all these beautiful things around you, good sights and sounds and so forth, your unhappiness cannot be overcome through these. But when you can maintain your happiness, then whatever external circumstances you may be in, they cannot overcome your mental peace of mind. So of us want happiness, which mainly has to do with your mental experience. So if you have peace of mind, you have peace, you are happy. Whereas if you are disturbed, you have no happiness. So therefore it is important to understand our psychology. If you are filled with anger, arrogance, jealousy, then you will not be really happy. You won't have happiness in your mind. Whereas without these experiences, if you are relaxed, calm, you will have peace of mind. So what disturbs our minds are these disturbing emotions, such as arrogance, jealousy, anger, and so forth. So anger, hatred, arrogance, and jealousy always consider others to be distant, and you want to cause harm to them. And this comes because of your extreme self-cherishing attitude. And so because of this self-cherishing attitude, which is selfishness, you will have these experiences or emotions of jealousy, anger, and so forth. So if you are friendly with others, then you have love towards them, and then there's less anger, jealousy, and so forth. And so the main factor which counters our anger, which disturbs our peace of mind, is that of love and compassion. On this earth, the major religious traditions, what I mean by major religions is, I'm not talking about the tribal kind of religious beliefs which are in remote places here and there, everywhere around the world, but the major religious traditions. Their main message is love and compassion, and also contentment, tolerance. If the followers of the different religious traditions practice their religions sincerely, all these religious traditions are meant for bringing peace and happiness to human beings. If we divide these major religions into two, there are the theistic religious traditions believing in Creator God, and then non-theistic religious traditions which do not believe in Creator God. So of course, philosophically, there are differences in these two different divisions of religions, but the theistic religions, such as Christianity or Islam, they say that the Creator God is full of love, infinite love. And nobody says that the God is full of anger. So I have some Muslim friends who say that as Muslims, they should share or have kindness and love towards all creature of Allah. And then those who talk about who believe in God, of course they believe that all 7 billion people on this earth are the children of the same God. So these religious traditions has this kind of philosophical idea which actually complements the belief or practice of love and compassion amongst human beings. Whereas within the non-theistic religious traditions, there are those of the Sankhya, non-theistic Sankhya school, Jainism and Buddhism. And in Buddhism, the Buddha himself has said that you are your own master. So, master or protector, which means that your pain and pleasure, experience of pain and pleasure are in your hands, and the Buddhas have not done anything for you. The Buddha has said that the sages do not wash away the sins of sentient beings, nor do they remove their suffering with their hands, nor do they transfer their own realization, but by teaching the truth, the reality as it is, they help beings to to reach liberation. So philosophically, there are differences between the non-theistic and theistic religious traditions, but both groups have the same aim to promote and enhance our love and compassion. So therefore, as a follower of the Buddha, and particularly as a follower of the Nalanda tradition of Buddhism, someone who has gone through the study, reflection and meditation of, found in this tradition, a Buddhist monk, and I'm also interested in modern science. So usually I tell people that I'm half a Buddhist monk and half scientist. So the fact that we should have the sense of oneness of human beings is very important. So because all of us do not want suffering, but we want happiness. So whether you are a believer or not, you want happiness. And then, secondly, as a Buddhist monk, my second commitment is for the religious harmony. All the major religious traditions of the world are meant for bringing love and compassion, whether you are a believer in the Creator God or non-theistic religious traditions. Creator gods, this is God in Christianity and Allah in Islam and so forth. So because these theistic religious traditions believe that God is infinite love, therefore their followers should also pay attention and take interest in developing love and compassion. And therefore it is very important for all the religious traditions to be in harmony with one another. Because these religious traditions are beneficial to their followers if they sincerely follow their religions. So all these religious traditions have the same message, which is love and compassion, and that really helps humanity. So, of course, philosophically, there are differences amongst these religious traditions. Within the Nalanda tradition of Buddhism also, there were those of the four classical philosophical schools, such as Vaibhashikas, Authenticas, Chittamatra, and Madhyamakas. So we have the Chittamatra, or the mind-only school of philosophy, and the Madhyamaka, or the middle way philosophy. So the Madhyamakas and the Chittamatras do not fight with each other by saying there are Madhyamakas or the Chittamatras. And therefore, because of the reason that we are the followers of different religious traditions, we should not fight amongst ourselves. So whether you are a follower of a theistic religious tradition, for example, if you fight amongst yourselves, Allah or God will not be happy. And those non-theistic religious traditions, if the followers of these traditions, if you actually harm other human beings, for example, the Buddha will not be pleased. And Mahavira, the Jain founder of Jainism, will also not be pleased. So in Jainism, there's a great practice, strong practice of non-violence. So how can you actually believe in non-violence while harming or hurting others and human beings? So because we cherish happiness and joy, therefore the religious traditions also teach love and compassion. So it's very important, because of the same message of love and compassion, all the religious traditions to be harmonious with one another. So this is what I tell everywhere I go, to create love and compassion amongst all human beings. So I talk about the human values and also religious harmony wherever I go. For the last 40 years, nearly 40 years, I have had discussions with modern scientists, and some scientists say that the basic human nature is compassionate.
Basic human nature is more compassionate.
And the reason they give is
any human being who have more compassionate feeling, the immune system is much better. Constant anger, constant sort of hatred is actually eating our immune system. 자, 이런 유산에 미 생기 중심이 창조되어야지.
So the scientists say the basic human nature is compassionate. And in our own experience, when we look at children of 3, 4, 5 years old, when they play with one another and laugh with one another, whether if they are able to do that, they do not really bother which kind of religious background or social background the other children come from. At one of the meetings with scientists, one scientist showed an animation. So in the animation, by showing the animation to an infant child, they showed me what reaction the infant child had. So in one of the animations, one child was pushing a ball uphill and had difficulty pushing it up, and another child comes and helps this first child. And when this was shown to an infant child, a human infant child who is about 4 or 5 months old, pre-verbal child, or 6th month. So when a child is being helped by another child to push the ball uphill, this infant child actually had this positive reaction, really laughing and smiling and feeling happy. And in the second animation as the first child was trying to push the ball uphill, another child comes and actually obstructs this. And when this was shown to the infant child had negative reaction. So when a child is being trying to harm another child, the infant also has negative reaction, and when a child is helped, the infant child also has this positive reaction. When you go in the market and see people gathered and laughing and playing with each other, are you happier? Or are you happier when two people are actually quarreling or running away from each other? Some people, when they see two people fighting, they also want to fight, indulge in fighing. But there are others who are actually, happier. So, but the basic human nature is such that when they see people happy, they also become happy. So if you have love and compassion, kindness, and you also are happy, when someone shows you love, kindness, and so forth, you are happy. Whereas when they are not good with you, you also are not happy. And you also, as social animals,
any social animal, friendship is key factor for survival or happy life.
For friendship, we need trust. If you have trust, then you will be friends, trusted friends. Even if you may have a friend who is wealthy and have power, if you don't really trust the other person, you will not be real friends with them. So the real human friendship comes when you have trust with one another and love and compassion to one another. So when you have compassion, you will not deceive others, be dishonest with others, but you will actually have the sense of solidarity with others. And so this creates an environment or atmosphere for trust, and then that actually builds your friendship with others. If you are selfish, you remain lonely and you will never be happy. So I usually say that if I actually think that I am the Dalai Lama, then I would be left alone and I will not have any friends. Whereas when I think that, because I think that I am one of the 7 billion human beings, I have lots of friends. So whether you are a believer or not, you should be a good person, not someone who is full of anger, jealousy, arrogance, and so forth. We're not talking about next life, whether you are born in heaven or hell, and so forth. But as a human being in this life, through the practice of love and compassion. So this is what I tell people around the world. So many people think that they have happiness, they would be able to be happy when they have wealth, material resources. If you look in the West, although you have lots of material development progress, there's lots of emotional crisis. So material development alone is not enough for our happiness. Together with it, we should also develop the inner values of love, compassion, and so forth, which are found in Indian and which has developed so much through the practice of meditation, such as single-pointed meditation of shamatha or samadhi, and vipassana or special insight meditation. So These traditions have been there in the Indian tradition since 3,000-4,000 years. So these meditations are meant for transforming our mind, and the Buddha had followed that tradition, and together with these meditations are the general meditation on the single pointed concentration, and inside the Buddha also discovered the selflessness, philosophical idea of the anatma. So when I talk to people around the world, I see that just as we already have in our school systems, taking care of our health, physical exercises and so forth, likewise we also need mental hygiene. So I'll go through a brief explanation of this text. So in praise for teaching the dependent origination is a praise to the Buddha. So with regard to how he was praised in it, is not from the point of view of his physical qualities, such as this having the 32 major and 8 minor marks, and having the voice, which is said to be qualified with 64 aspects of sound and so forth. But on the basis of his teaching of dependent origination, he taught the dependent origination firstly in his first sermon on the Four Noble Truths, within which we find the teaching of the causality based on the 12 links of dependent origination, beginning with ignorance and ending with that of aging and death. So Buddha teaches that of the law of causality in the Four Noble Truths, teaching on the Four Noble Truths, saying that if ignorance leads to the unenlightened existence and life in samsara, and if once you overcome ignorance, then you will end this kind of unenlightened existence. And so right after he became enlightened, he did not give teaching right away. He said that I have found this nectar-like dharma, which is profound, peaceful, unfabricated, clear light, and uncompounded, which if I were to teach to others, nobody will understand. Therefore, I'll remain silent in the forest, he said. And so, after that, he gave the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, which we find in the Pali tradition as well. And so the three pitaka, the three baskets of the teaching of the Buddha, were given firstly during the first sermon, which also contains that of the practice of monastic discipline. And in the Pali tradition, and so these the teaching that are found in the first sermon are something which is shared between the Pali and Sanskrit traditions. And next, the Buddha gave teaching in the Vulture Peak, the teaching on the perfection of wisdom, in which he what he taught during the first sermon, such as impermanence of life and suffering, selflessness and emptiness. And then he also taught those of the suffering, the origin of suffering, true cessation and true path. And so during the first sermon, the Buddha mainly taught that of law of causality, which says that whatever effects there are, they arise because of their causes. And not only that effects arise from cause, that the effects are dependent on cause, but even the cause is dependent on its effect. So although when the cause is there, the effect is yet to arise. It's in the future, but still we say this is a cause because it'll give rise to some effect or result. And therefore, we say the effect is dependent on the cause. And not only that the effect is dependent on cause, but the cause itself is also posited in relation to its effect, and therefore the cause is, in this sense, dependent or on the effect. So if you think more closely, when you say that the cause gives rise to its effect, we can do more kind of analysis into the cause, whether the effect arises from some something which is non-existent, and so forth. So of course we can say that an effect arises on the basis of cause, but if you analyze the cause itself, even quantum physicists today say that when they break the things into the atomic and constituent factors, and even these atoms are broken down into the subatomic particles and so forth. The quantum physicists say that nothing really exists objectively. And so the quantum physicists are not citing some religious text or scripture, but they do their own investigation and analysis into the nature of things. And so this is very similar to how Buddhists analyze the objects, such as matter and so forth, and say that nothing objectively exists. So this way of investigating into the reality of things, what is the purpose of it? In the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Nagarjuna says, karma and afflictions arise because of our conceptual construct, which says that our suffering, experience of pain, pleasure come from that of karma, and the karma are created because of our afflictive emotions, mental afflictions. And these emotional afflictions are also based on our mental constructs. And so this also is said in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika that because of some kind of wrong or incorrect rumination, we develop the mental afflictions such as attachment, anger, and confusion. So I've heard that a Chinese from mainland China, a quantum physicist, has actually said that someone who actually is convinced, a scientist who is convinced in the fact that things have no objective existence, because of that kind of conviction, there's less reaction towards things, seeing things or perceiving them as in black and white. And Nagarjuna says that this kind of mental incorrect rumination is because of mental fabrication, which sees things as if they have some kind of objective, independent existence. And this perception, this misconception, is done away with by the realization of, or the wisdom of emptiness. And so, when in the Madhyamaka philosophy or Buddhist philosophy, when it's said that things do not exist truly, what it says is that things do not exist the way they appear to us, as if to have some kind of independent existence. And because of this appearance, we also cling to such a way of existence, and therefore the rest of the mental afflictions, attachment, anger, and so forth, also arise. One Indian nuclear physicist whom I knew, Raja Ramana, who is no more, of course, but he said, and he actually quoted a verse from the Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Nagarjuna, and told me that quantum physics is something new in the West. But the concept or the philosophical idea of quantum physics is already found in India over 2,000 years ago. So this text in praise of the Buddha for teaching dependent origination, on the basis of which the Buddha is praised to be an unparalleled teacher. And so in this way, Tsongkhapa, the author, praises the Buddha for teaching dependent origination. He who speaks on the basis of seeing, this makes him a knower and teacher unexcelled. I bow to you, O conqueror, you who saw dependent origination and taught it. So the reason that he gives is whatever degeneration there is in the world, the root of all this is ignorance. You taught that it is dependent origination, the seeing of which will undo this ignorance. So suffering and degeneration, our misfortunes, their root is our ignorance. So here, with regard to ignorance, there's ignorance about law of causality, and there's also the ignorance about the reality of how things are. So the root of samsara, the cycle of existence, is this misconception, which is ignorant, which is this ignorance about the how things really are. And so because of which the rest of the mental afflictions such as attachment and hatred or anger arise. And so the antidote to this is not your prayer to the Buddha or through the practice of cultivation of love and compassion or having just faith in the Buddha, but we need to understand that things are conventionally existent and therefore they are dependently arisen. So things are designated and therefore they do not have any objective independent existence, which is how things appear to us. And so therefore when you understand this, you'll be able to counter this ignorance. So how can an intelligent person not comprehend that this path of dependent origination is the essential point of your teaching? This being so, who will find, O Savior, a more wonderful way to praise you than to praise you for having taught this origination through dependence? Whatsoever depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence. So this shows that things are, this teaches that things are merely designated and dependent. What excellent instruction can there be more amazing than this proclamation? So by grasping at it, the child is strengthened bondage to extreme views. For the wise, this very fact is the doorway to cut free from the net of elaborations. Since this teaching is not seen elsewhere, you alone are the teacher. So when the Madhyamakas, when the Buddhist philosophers say that things are merely designated, we are not saying that things can be any way you think. But because things are dependent on causes and conditions, so because of the law of causality as the reason, when you think through, what you find is that things are merely designated. And so what the Madhyamakas use as the final reason to see that things are devoid of any intrinsic existence, the reasoning that they use is that things are dependently arisen. For other schools of thought, that becomes the reason, contradictory reason. Wondrous teacher, wondrous refuge, wondrous speaker, wondrous savior. I pay homage to that teacher who taught well-dependent origination to help heal sentient beings. O benefactor, you have taught the peerless reason to ascertain emptiness, the heart of the teaching. So the Madhyamakas, who see that things, whatever there is, has no self-defined existence. So they say that things have no independent or intrinsic existence because things are dependently originated. Whereas this reasoning can be an unestablished reason for the non-Buddhist, whereas for the those who are still as Buddhists assert some kind of an objective existence, this kind of reasoning is contradictory. So it says this way of dependent origination, those who perceive it as contradictory or unestablished, how can they comprehend your system? For you, when one sees emptiness, in terms of the meaning of dependent origination, and so these two words, dependent origination, can actually eliminate the two extreme views of eternalism and nihilism. And with dependence, what is eliminated is that of eternalism or permanence in things, and with origination, that of the nihilism is eliminated. So Master Nagarjuna says that since there is nothing which is not dependent, therefore there's nothing which is not empty. And so he actually comments on the Buddha's teaching of emptiness thoroughly through reason. Particularly his writings, which are the Precious Garland and that of the fundamental wisdom verses of the wisdom of the middle way. So whereas so for you, verse number 11, for you, when one sees emptiness in terms of the meaning of dependent origination, the being then being devoid of intrinsic existence, possessing valid function, do not contradict. Whereas when one sees the opposite, since there can be no function in emptiness, no emptiness in what has functions, one falls into the dreadful abyss you maintain. So when there is some change in the cause, there is change in the effect. So if the cause cannot undergo any change, then the effect cannot arise at all. So if things were to have any kind of intrinsic, objective, independent existence, then you cannot talk about bringing about some effect by transforming, causing some transformation in the cause at all. So therefore, in your teaching, seeing dependent origination is hailed, that too, not as an utter non-existence, nor as an intrinsic existence. Non-contingent is like a skyflower. Hence, there is nothing that is not dependent. If things exist through their essence, their dependence on causes and conditions for their existence is contradiction. Therefore, since no phenomena exists other than origination through dependence, no phenomena exists other than being devoid of intrinsic existence, you taught. So because intrinsic nature cannot be negated, if phenomena will possess some intrinsic nature, nirvana would become impossible and elaboration could not be seized, you taught. Therefore, who could challenge you, you who proclaim with lion's roar in the assembly of learned ones repeatedly that everything is utterly free of intrinsic nature, that there is no intrinsic existence at all, and that all functions as this arising independent of that? What need is there to say that these two converge without conflict? So dependence and non-independence are mutually exclusive. And there cannot be a third possibility. Either things have to be dependent or independent, not depending on anything. It is through the reason of dependent origination that one does not lean towards an extreme. That you have declared this excellently is the reason, O Savior, of your being an unexalted speaker. All of this is devoid of essence, and from this arises that effect. And so because things are devoid of any independent intrinsic existence, we can talk about effects arising from cause, like an illusion. So in Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Nagarjuna, he says that, Nagarjuna says, Nagarjuna poses these questions which are raised by the realists, Buddhist realists, who say that if things were to have no intrinsic existence, then the Four Noble Truths and the Three Jewels and so forth cannot be true. But Nagarjuna's answer is that things do not have any intrinsic independent existence because they are dependently arisen. And we are not, Madhyamakas say that we are not rejecting the existence of things as such. The two certainties complement each other with no contradiction at all. Dharmakirti says that because the Buddha is someone who is reliable in terms of the main teaching, therefore we can actually believe or in his other teachings as well. So generally, the Buddha's teachings are based on reason, but in the Pali tradition, the Four Noble Truths and the 16 attributes and also the 37 factors of enlightenment are explained on the basis of scriptural quotation. This I have learned from Pali scholars through discussion with them, whereas in the Sanskrit tradition, these 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths are explained or through reason, and therefore we can actually go together with the scientists. If we only base ourselves on scriptural quotation alone, then we cannot have discussions with the scientists. So of course when we talk about the fact that the higher rebirth, such as human rebirth, can be actually obtained through the practice of 10 virtuous actions, this may have a reason to prove, but we cannot directly prove that. Whereas when we understand that the Buddha has taught that causes and conditions give rise to their effects, then we can actually believe that this the practice of the 10 virtuous actions can lead to the higher rebirth and so forth. So even if we cannot understand the Buddha's teaching fully, we could to a certain extent think that, oh, the speaker of these teachings was somebody who was very special. So it's like relying on a teacher who teaches us the different subjects. Although we do not yet understand everything that the teacher knows, but from our own understanding we can say, oh, these such and such words of the teacher can also be trusted because of such and such reason. Verse number 35, 36, and 37. On page 20. So verse number 38 says, all that you have taught proceeds by way of dependent origination. That too is done for the sake of nirvana. You have no deeds that do not bring peace. And so with regard to the first two lines, we can refer to the teaching of the Buddha, free from contradiction between earlier and later paths. It grants fulfillment of being's two aims. Grants fulfillment of being's two aims. So I've read the commentary, which is on the difficult points of Tattva Samgraha. This commentary was written by Kamalashila on the text called Tattva Samgraha, written by his own master, Chandarakshita. And in that he mentions that through the understanding of the law of causality, we create the causes for higher rebirth, such as human rebirth and so forth. And on the basis of understanding the reality of the dependent nature of things, we create the causes for that of liberation. So these are what are meant by the two aims, the higher rebirth and liberation, as well as your loving kin and sources of health. And for this system, my joy increases evermore. For its sake, you have given way again and again over countless eons, sometimes body, at others your life, as well as your loving kin and resources of wealth. Seeing the qualities of this teaching pulls hard from your heart, just like what a hook does to a fish. Sad it is not to have heard from you. So within the Madhyamaka, the middle way philosophical school, there are subdivisions such as the Savatantrika Madhyamakas and Prasangika Madhyamakas, and within the Savatantrika Madhyamakas, there are those which are called Yogacara Savatantrika Madhyamaka and Sutrantika Savatantrika Madhyamakas. And Master Bhavaviveka, in his writings, such as Lamp of Wisdom, which is a commentary to Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Master Nagarjuna, so if you can be familiarize yourself with these three texts, Tarkajivala, the Blades of Wisdom, and Lamp of Wisdom by Bhavaviveka, as well as Chandrakirti's the clear or lucid words, I mean, it would be really helpful to understand the Madhyamaka philosophy. Verse number 49 on page 23. The Night Lily Groves of Nagarjuna treatise, Nagarjuna's treatise, Nagarjuna, whom you prophesied. would unravel your unexalted vehicle as it is, shunning extremes of existence and non-existence. Illuminated by the garland of white light of Chandra Kirti's two texts, which are that of the Prasanapada, the lucid words, and also Madhyamaka Avatara, Introduction to the Middle Way. Well-uttered insights. These two texts, and Chandra, whose stainless wisdom orb is full, who glides freely across scripture's space, who dispels the darkness of extremist hearts and outshines the constellations of the false speakers. When through my teacher's kindness I saw this, my mind found a rest at last. So this text is completed. So this pertains to that of developing the wisdom of emptiness, and for that of the practice of the altruism, which is bodhicitta, we'll go through the text written by the Geshe Langri Thangpa. The 8 verses of training the mind, whether you are a believer of religion or not, except for the last, the final verse in this text on the 8 verses of mind training. The rest teach that of altruism. So it is very helpful for everyone who practice love with the determination to achieve the highest aim for the benefit of all sentient beings, which surpasses even the wish-fulfilling gem. May I hold them dear at all times. Whenever I interact with someone, may I view myself as the lowest amongst all, so not to be haughty and arrogant. So when we cultivate bodhicitta, we actually and recite these certain lines, we say that I'll call upon all sentient beings as my guests. So when you actually invite sentient beings as your guests of happiness, I mean, you cannot look down upon them. And from the very depths of my heart, respectfully hold others as superior. So self-cherishing attitude that we are used to, and this misconception of seeing things as if they have some independent existence. So regarding this, it says, in all my deeds may I probe into my mind as soon as mental and emotional afflictions arise, as they endanger myself and others, may I strongly confront them and avert them. When I see beings of unpleasant character oppressed by strong negativity and suffering, may I hold them dear, for they are rare to find, as if I discovered a jeweled treasure. When others out of jealousy treat me wrongly with abuse, slander and scorn, may I take upon myself the defeat and offer to others the victory. When someone whom I have helped or in whom I have placed great hopes mistreat me in extremely hurtful ways, may I regard them still as my precious teacher. In brief, may I offer benefit and joy to all my mothers, both directly or indirectly. May I quietly take upon myself all hurts and pains of my mothers. And then the last verse is about emptiness. And so having realized that things have no independent existence, but still that the cause and conditions work to give rise to their effects, we see things as if they are like illusion. So as I said earlier, we will go through the ceremony for bodhicitta, this spirit, altruistic spirit of enlightenment. So if you are altruistic, you'll be happy, and there's going to be happiness and joy in society and community that you live in, and others will be smiling. So everyone around you will be smiling. So this, in mundane or religious terms, it is the most important thing that we need to bear in mind and cultivate, which is love and compassion. So whether you are a believer or not, So amongst the believers, we have Muslims or Christians, whether you are a Muslim or Christian or Buddhist. Everyone knows that the warm heart is something which is beneficial to oneself. So from now on, you should determine that you will be a good person with a good heart. Make a pledge if you can. But even if you cannot make a pledge, have the courage to be. So if you have got an evil heart towards others, others would actually shun you. Say that they will say that this person is quite evil. He has a bad heart. So you should think that from now on, I will be someone who is a good person without bearing any evil thoughts towards others. So I'll recite a few verses from Shantideva's Bodhisattvacharya Avatara, or the way of the Bodhisattva way of life. Suffering there is in the world comes from selfishness. Whatever happiness there is in the world all come from wishing others to be happy. Not exchange one's own happiness and joy with the suffering of others. Live alone, reaching Buddhahood. Even in samsara, you'll not be happy. You are not able to increase cherishing others over oneself. Your life will be full of misfortunes. Lots of unfriendly people will be there in your life. So if you have a good heart, not being selfish, but wishing others to be happy, you'll be happy. You'll have all kinds of good things happening to you in your life. In the same text by Shantideva, therefore, which intelligent person will despair, feel discouraged to ride the horse of bodhicitta, this altruistic spirit of enlightenment, which will lead one from bliss to bliss and do away with all despair. So if you can actually have the experience of bodhicitta, you will be happy all the time. Shantideva also says, may I be the sustenance or the varieties of sustenance for all beings, just like those of the four elements and the space. And so this is about that of altruism. And next, we'll do a meditation on emptiness. So as I explained earlier, when you look at me, for example, you'll say, oh, the Dalai Lama is there on the throne. But check, what is the Dalai Lama? Who is the Dalai Lama? My body is not me. So looking at the Dalai Lama and hearing the Dalai Lama's words, you would think that, oh, he has such and such thought in his mind, listening to his words. But then the body or the speech or the mind of the Dalai Lama is not the Dalai Lama. His body is not the Dalai Lama. His speech is not the Dalai Lama, but his speech, and neither is his mind the Dalai Lama, but his mind. So in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Nagarjuna says that Tathagata is not one with his aggregates, nor separate from them. The Tathagata is not within the aggregates, nor are the aggregates in the Tathagata. What else is Tathagata? So it goes through this kind of analysis, whether the Tathagata is dependent intrinsically on his aggregates and so forth. So I use this verse and relate it to myself, usually. Neither am I one with the aggregates, nor separate from them. I'm not in the aggregates, nor are the aggregates in me. Who am I then? So when I look at you also, at this crossroad of the six perceptions, whether you're monks or lay persons, male and female, Of course, you exist. But how do you appear to me? I may say this is a bhikshu, a monk, and this is so and so. So there is this appearance at the crossroad of the six perceptions of appearance. But there's no real ground when I investigated into your nature, but there's a hazy, deceptive appearance. This dualistic appearance, which is hazy, and this is a deceptive show. Do not believe that they are truly existent as they appear to me. But when I am able to feel convinced that you do not exist the way you appear to me, I'm getting at how the real way of your existence, which is emptiness. Just as the clouds in the autumn space dissipate into the sky, likewise, when I am totally absorbed in emptiness, all these dualistic appearances will disappear. So though I do not know much, but I do think through on these points. So of course things exist, there's no denying. Acknowledging that all sentient beings across the expanse of space are same in not wanting suffering but wanting happiness. You should feel determined that you will hold other sentient beings very precious to yourself. And just as you hold yourself precious to yourself, you will hold all sentient beings as precious. So, although we can develop this kind of altruism, but when you actually do this kind of critical analysis into the nature of things, even with regard to the Buddha, the Tathagata, what we are doing is trying to find the ultimate nature of the Buddha. So by having the realization of emptiness, which comes through gradual process, through study, reflection and meditation, you are creating what is known as the accumulation of wisdom. And with altruism, you accumulate or create that of what is known as merit. So Master Nagarjuna says, through these two, the merit and wisdom, the Buddha's two bodies, the Buddha's form body and his Dharmakaya are brought about. So it's most important for you on a daily basis to meditate on altruism, that is bodhicitta, and then the wisdom of emptiness, which I do on a daily basis. So these are the ones which actually transform myself, brings transformation within myself. So with these as the basis within your experience, then when you do deity yoga practice, it'll make sense. Without these two principles, bodhicitta and the wisdom of emptiness, even if you may do some kind of deity yoga practice, it may not make much sense. What I've done is an introduction to the teaching of the Buddha for the Buddhists mainly. So I had the opportunity to express myself to you, and there are Muslim friends gathered here. So we have different religious traditions, and then there are also non-believers. But having the practice of altruism is something which all of us, whether believers or not, should do at the crossroads of the six collections of consciousness, which have diverse perceptions and so forth. So this completes our discourse on the Dharma for today.